I can't listen to myself again, just for, never mind. So, yeah, so we started this whole effort around June, the middle of June. So putting all this together took a lot of people, and people really put in their time. So Mr. Metcalfe and Otis and Amy all really pitched in. But before we begin, we have a feel-good moment for you. I'm going to hand this off to Jeff Rainford in a moment, which is Mayor Slate's deputy mayor / chief of staff / everything that makes the city run guy, who's really cool, has a lot of ability, and he has another guy that has decided to give some time for us this evening to introduce Walter Metcalfe. But before we get to him, we have a real feel-good moment for you, something we thought would be really cool, and that is Peter Hofner. Peter's a friend of mine. He's the chairman and president of St. James Winery here in Missouri. It's not in St. Louis, it's just south of here, well, southwest? Southwest of here. But it is a Missouri treasure. It's a regional treasure. Wines in Missouri is it's big business. Missouri is the 8th largest wine-producing state in the Union, and there's a good reason for that. Peter is one of those reasons. The wine you're drinking tonight is from the Norton grape, which has a fantastic Mississippi River-centric story to it that's international. And just for a couple of minutes to get you going and to set the mood right for, you do have candles, and it is a candlelit dinner. So to set the mood right, why not talk about wine? And Peter's just gonna, he came all the way over from St. James Winery to donate this wine to us this evening. So this is all donated by St. James Winery. So thank you, Peter. I'll hand it off to you. He's a much better speaker than I, just to tell you a little bit about how the Mississippi is providing you your red wine this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that very much.
Yeah, you get the cool stuff.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah. Oops.
There we go. Is this working? Very good. Welcome. Sure appreciate everybody being here, being a part of Missouri. So let's get to the good stuff. Today we picked Norton grapes, actually. We're out in the vineyard today, our crews. My mom and dad started the winery in 1970, and at that time there were only a couple hundred wineries in the United States. And they had an argument, and Dad wanted to be here in Missouri that has a proud history. One time was one of the largest wine-growing regions in the world. The 3rd largest winery was in Hermann, Missouri, and the Norton grape was in the middle of that. Mom wanted to go out to Sonoma. Dad won. We're here. He wanted to be a big fish in this small pond, and over the years we've grown. We make about 500,000 gallons. We distribute in 19 states, and the best part of it all is we're on this wine frontier of economic development here in Missouri. The industry's grown to about 120 wineries and has a $1.5 billion impact on our economy in this state. Almost 1 million tourist visits to our winery. But it all has this history that goes back to what the Norton grape stands for in this state. The Norton grape actually has a long, long history. It grows wild in Missouri, but its real claim to fame was in the 1870s. There was phylloxera outbreak in France, and the French industry was dying, and no one knew why. And they offered a big prize to anybody that could solve their problem. Then they immediately funded a very large research and development program at their universities, a breeding program, much like the one in Minnesota we were talking about earlier. And so over the years, they started looking, could they save their industry before it died? Well, there were 2 guys in Missouri that decided. C.V. Riley was one of them, and George Hussman was the other. They knew that there were phylloxera-resistant vines here in Missouri. And once they found out about what was going on in France, they started shipping Norton grapes and some of the other grapes here in Missouri over to France, the rootstock. And the French grafted on the rootstock, and it saved the French industry. So if you go to Montpelier, you'll see a statue that salutes Missouri's role in saving the industry in the 19th century. So the Norton grape runs through our veins as vintners in this state. It's our state grape. In 2006, Governor Holden made it our state grape, and everything we do surrounds this grape. So I hope you enjoy it tonight. Our family's very proud to produce it, and we're very happy to be here to show it off to you. Thank you for being here.
This is only going to take about 30 seconds, so I'm not going to clip it on. I just want to bring up our next, the person who's going to introduce Walter Metcalfe is Jeff Rainford. First time I met Jeff, I don't even know if he remembers this, probably not, but it was kind of a funny story. I used to represent mayors in Washington, D.C., and before I took this gig, funny, and but I really wanted to do something for my hometown, St. Louis, or Missouri. And so I asked Mayor Slay at a U.S. Conference of Mayors event, hey, Mayor, can I do something for St. Louis? And he's like, what do you mean? I said, no, there's a volunteer. You know, you've got representation. I just want to do something for my hometown. And he's like, yeah, maybe we'll talk about it, whatever. So then about a month later, I was visiting home for the 4th of July. I was at Six Flags with my family. The mayor calls me at Six Flags. Actually, it was Sherry. Sherry called me at Six Flags. I picked up the phone. She's like, yeah, Colin, this is Sherry. I work for Mayor Slay. Yeah, hi, Sherry. Yeah, the mayor's ready to see you today. What do you mean today? When? In a couple hours. Okay. She's like, where are you? I'm at Six Flags. And I just got out of the water park. And she said, well, the mayor's ready to see you. And I said, well, you tell him I'll be there. So my family, I said, I got to go. We only took one car. So I plucked my whole family out of Six Flags. They're real troopers, big supporters, German family. And I'm in swimming suit that's soaked. So we went to Walmart. And did I mention this is funded by the Walton Family Foundation? I went to Walmart and got some khakis and a collared shirt, and then, but it got wet in the car, so I come down the hall in City Hall, and Jeff is the first one to greet me. The mayor's right behind him, and I'm in little flip-flops with khakis that are wet and a collared shirt that's soaked too. And Jeff just goes, hi, Colin. And I said, yeah, I know, I'm sorry about my appearance. It's a long story, but nothing illegal and no TROs, right, Walter? And he's like, that's okay. And then the mayor wanted to sit on the couch, so I sat on the couch and I got the couch wet. But it was, you know, it all ended up in a good place and no one got put in jail. So it turned out to be a good conversation. So Jeff Rainford, that's a long way of saying that Jeff Rainford is a really nice guy, very understanding. He does a lot for our town. The city of St. Louis would not be where it's at today without him because he is the man behind the curtain with the mayor. So his chief of staff and his deputy mayor. So without further ado, please, Jeff, come up.
Sorry we put you through the ringer like that. He got it. So you know somebody's important when they got to bring somebody in to introduce them. So that's Walter. First of all, I want to repeat something I think the mayor's told you. Welcome to St. Louis. We're really glad you're here. What you're doing this week is really, really important. What you're about to hear about is this iconic structure right outside the window, the Gateway Arch. So the Gateway Arch is one of the great structures in the world. Daniel Libeskind, who's one of the great architects of the world, actually came to St. Louis for his honeymoon. So unfortunately, he had a very understanding wife so that he could see the Gateway Arch for the first time in person. He considered it to be, or considers it to be one of the 5 great architectural structures of the world. It is something that we're very proud of. As you can imagine, the arch did not just pop out of the ground. It took a lot of work. Our city fathers dreamed up some kind of monument to westward expansion in the 1930s. And a man named Luther Eli Smith was a lawyer who championed the cause and who, through great energy and great, what I call grit, drove the process. And they did a competitive process, had to raise the money in the whole 9 yards. And because clearly a lot of people are responsible for the arch, but one man, Luther Eli Smith, is really responsible for it above all others, and he drove the process, and it happened because of him. Now, fast forward to a few years ago, those of you who look out the window, especially those of you who are in cities who have great riverfronts, you look at our riverfront and you don't see much down there. So a few years ago, the mayor asked a group of civic leaders to look at developing our riverfront down in the floodplain. And those of you who live along a section of the river that is wild will understand how difficult, and really we came to the conclusion it is impossible for us to develop our river front down in the floodplain because the river is so wild and so unpredictable. So rather than throwing up our hands and saying, well, we're done, we're just never going to have a riverfront, few of us came to the conclusion that, well, why don't we develop a riverfront outside of the floodplain? Well, outside of the floodplain, of course, is the arch grounds, which at the time, nobody would have thought, hey, let's develop the arch grounds because the arch is such an iconic structure. But we did, and we started a process, and we started moving it forward together. But just like with the construction, the original construction of the arch, which a lot of people were responsible for, one guy drove it, Luther Eli Smith, there's one person driving the process to turn the arch grounds into something that is as iconic as the arch, and to reconnect our city with both the arch grounds and the river. There are a lot of us who have been working on it, but there's one person driving the process, and one person without whom we would be nowhere, and we would not be on the cusp of actually building something that is just as great as the arch, and that is your guest tonight, Walter Metcalfe. Walter is a partner in Bryan Cave. How old is Bryan Cave now? 138, and you were not a junior partner when Bryan Cave was founded, is that correct? One of our cities and one of the country's most prestigious law firms, Bryan Cave, and Walter has been involved in pretty much every major civic undertaking in St. Louis. But this one, he has given his full energy, his full attention, and his full set of skills, which are vast, and we're very lucky that we have him, and that we're very lucky that he has chosen this particular project, which our mayor has declared as the #1 development project in our metropolitan area. And so without further ado, Walter is going to give you a presentation tonight on what we call CityArchRiver, which is connecting the city again with the arch and with the river, and there's some exciting aspects to it, and Walter is driving the process. And so without further ado, I want to introduce Walter Metcalfe.
Thank you, Jeff. You can tell who's not getting paid for his work. The more enthusiastic the introduction, the less you're being paid. But the psychic reward, the spiritual reward, is terrific. Because right now you're sitting at this building is built at the intersection of Broadway and Olive. And as I tell people way too often, my first summer job was when I was 11 years old in my father's law office at Broadway and Olive. My first job out of law school was at a law firm located at Broadway and Olive. My office is 2 floors down at Broadway and Olive. Clearly, we've got to get this thing done and knocked, and so I can go someplace. But I love being where I am, and I love talking to Mississippi River people, because as much as we talk about the arch is here because the Mississippi's here. And the arch is here because the Missouri River fed the Mississippi River, and the Ohio came down to it, and the Illinois came down to it, et cetera, et cetera. It's all about what rivers did to open up the United States and capture the magnificent world that we have if we could spend the time to appreciate it. So we sat here, and as Jeff said, there was this frustration. Our riverfront, compared to anybody else's, is not interesting. We all know the problems below Lock and Dam 26, 27. The river flows freely to New Orleans. There's no controlling it. But there is still no excuse for us to turn our back just on the majesty of the commerce and industry that goes down this river and the energy that's on this river. So we set out to try to correct it. And we went a little differently than other people did. There's no secret sauce. It's all common sense. But it took a lot of patience. And number one, it took a mayor saying, this is my number one economic development priority. So if you want to close Eads Bridge to show the design teams who are competing what the river really looks like, and we'll have lunch there, do it. Things like that. Doesn't cost a lot of money. But it's the type of thing where people say, they'll close the bridge for us to sit there and see what this river really means. So they'd respect the river when they came up with their designs. And that persisted throughout and has persisted to this day. The mayor has always stood firm and said, this is it. And this isn't tax incentive driven, this isn't speculator driven, this isn't that or anything else. It's design driven, it's to honor our past, and it's to express our future, because St. Louis under Luther Ailey Smith could very well, after the international design competition, and probably most people expected it, come out of the design competition and put 7 statues of Thomas Jefferson on the riverfront. That would have been the easy way, but instead they took Eero Saarinen's extraordinary design, which is all about optimism and discovery and courage and innovation and all those things, which is the discovery of that America enjoys. And I will say this is just a commercial for St. Louis, which goes away from your river, but we were the ones who funded Lindbergh to go to Paris, and J.S. McDonnell was the one who put Mercury and Gemini into space, the first space. And so we like the idea of discovery and courage. That's the end of my commercial. I'll get to the facts. CityArchRiver started our design competition after the National Park Service finished its general management plan on December 8th, 2009. We're in the process of design, engineering, contracting, compliance, construction work in process. We will be completed on the 50th anniversary of the laying of the keystone of the arch, which is 10/28/15. And I tell you, if you're looking for project ideas for whatever you are doing on your rivers, just set a deadline. Find one that has a little emotional impact, as this does, because a lot of people, myself included, our host tonight said he wasn't there, he wasn't born yet, but catch a date that really means something and go for it, so that people don't do it as the last thing they do during the day, they do it as the first thing they do in the morning. That looks kind of easy there, except all that's in between is raising $300 to $400 million and going through the compliance and environmental assessments and everything else. But we're doing it. Design team was international. It was built on the Saarinen design. The winning design was from the Michael van Valkenburg team in New York. It had on its team all manner of capable people, because the rules of the design were that you'll win this with a design that can be completed by October 28, 2015, and is of a quality that Eero Saarinen would have appreciated. We didn't put a dollar budget on it. To the right is what has become an aspiration. There's just too much to do in Illinois to get it done by October 28, 2015. But I urge everybody to recognize there are 2 sides to the river. We've got to get that done to really make this a complete experience. And we will, just may not be by October 28, 2015. There's your hotel, there's the Hyatt, and when you walk out now, if you peek around, you'll see that wonderful arch leg, but basically you'll see cars and you'll see signs that tell you how to get out of town. That's what it will be. This is funded. This is done. We've got to locate all the trees, this, that, and the other. A lot of work to do. But basically, that's an orientation point. When you come out of the Hyatt, you'll have a different experience. Transform and enhance the arch experience. New arrival, new access, easier access, new reasons to learn, enjoy. Don't feel like you walk in, take your photo, and leave. Our aspiration for regional connectivity, as I said, was to go to both sides of the river, and we will someday. The Malcolm Martin Memorial Park, which is where you saw the geysers at 6 p.m. They go off at noon, 3, and 6. Will be joined to the National Park. As a matter of law, we can do it. As a matter of policy, now the National Park Service has said yes. As a matter of budget, we're a little slow. But there's Mike Buellhorn, who leads the Metro East Parks and Recreation District, is just a monster asset, ally and partner in this. And if anybody can get it done finally, he will. So new arrival experiences. You start with the fact that right now when you look out your hotel from an upper window, you'll see all sorts of bridges and Memorial Drive stretching on both sides so that you have a lot of cement between you and the arch. Talk about not connecting. That was glorious in the 60s when we were collecting the interstate highways, and it was, but it was kind of temporary when we finally realized that we were kind of destroying a lot of cities by driving our interstates through the middle. So we will do what you will see by 2015, October 28th, is that, closing Memorial Drive, putting a park on the east side of the highway, putting a park over the highway, taking down Walnut and widening it, putting up a new bridge, putting up a Pine Street overpass for pedestrians, flipping ramps, and MoDOT is on the job, on the case, and it will be done when the Mississippi River Bridge is done in the end of 2014. They can do everything here. They'll start June, they'll break ground June 2013, but it will be done on time. That's what you see, I say now, is this marvelous sculpture, this marvelous ground, although it needs to be invigorated. It's much too placid, and there's really not a sense of welcome, or you can step on the grass. You can, but you wouldn't think so. You got to get through that, and we will. That's right now going across Walnut. You get graffiti in front of this wonderful old cathedral, be it highway graffiti or cars. That's what it will be, cleaned up. More important, this is the park over the highway. When you walk out of the Hyatt now, it's stagnant. Actually, the walks don't line with the walks on the other side, and you've got to go across 6 lanes of Memorial Drive and I-70 in the middle with the fumes and the noise. Voila. And this is funded. The bus drop-offs now will move behind the hotel and over to the other side, and you'll have this walk that is much more graceful, welcoming, accessible, and you'll feel safe because you'll know where you are. You're not looking for cars to knock you off. And the noise will be a lot less, the fumes will be diverted, and the new museum entry, instead of one being on each end of the arch, will be in the center. Memorial Drive again, that's the view you will have instead. This is the welcome to the new museum. It will be very light. Because it's a National Historic Landmark, the museum entry can be no higher than the berm is today. Go figure, but live it and love it and get it done. And this is another point we've had. We've just plain said, we're looking for the entire goal to be satisfied. And when we go up against something that we just may just say, what is this? This is nuts. Don't say that, because they got the law on their side, and keep going. But you'll have a completely different experience entering the arch. For those who have been there right now, you go down under the arch, you lose your orientation, you're in a dark hole kind of. Now you'll be looking back, you'll connect to the old courthouse, which is a wonderful building in and of itself, and you'll know where you are and feel more comfortable. And again, you're walking down, you'll get to the tram so you can go up the arch should you choose. Big thing which you all from out of town won't really get is what we're doing at the north end, which is to take out this terrible parking garage, which is oh so convenient. You drive in, you come up, you get out of the car, you run up the arch, you take your picture, you get back to the garage, you get back in your car, and the sign says 44, 55, 70, 64. Not a good economic development plan. And people don't go back into the city. They don't go to Forest Park. They don't go to the Botanical Garden. They don't go to Cahokia Mounds. They don't go to the Confluence. They don't go to Grafton and Alton, which is, you know, they may not think they're part of us. They are. I know you're part of us. And this wonderful confluence area, which is above in the Alton Lake, which is so exciting, we need to direct people there instead of the interstate. So keep them here and show them. We will do this by taking out a road, Washington Avenue, which parallels Eads Bridge and gives a terrible 5-way intersection. I won't bore you all with that. Simplify the intersections, though, and let people through. That's the entrance to one of the 10 greatest sculptures, public sculptures in the world, folks. Brought to you, now maybe some of you like this kind of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood approach to Sesame Street, whatever approach to the arch. I think it's entitled to a little more dignity. And we will get that by tearing down the garage again, hooking into Laclede's Landing for the parking. This is the view from over the parking garage right now, which separates Eads Bridge from the park. That's what it becomes. And that area can be activated, unlike the viewscape of the arch to the old courthouse, which the National Park Service does respect tremendously. That we can use. So like Millennium Park in Chicago, the St. Louis Zoo will have it for a month each summer. Botanical Garden will have it for a couple of weeks. Science Center for a couple of weeks. Places where they can show their wares and activate it and place another reason to enjoy and get out of the car and let the kids run. Gardens, Lewis and Clark Discovery Garden, where the garage is now down a level, where you can understand much more about the flora and fauna of the rivers, and with much more explanation and much more description and much more relaxing. This is the shot I love the most. This is the beautiful parking garage on the left with a fence guarding you, sidewalk which has kind of got misaligned. Eads Bridge, built in 1872, may still be the best bridge over the Mississippi. National Historic Landmark in itself, blocked out from the arch grounds itself, and a road which has quite a drop to it, which is not disabled friendly. That's what it can become, will become, and landscape architecture is a lot more reasonably priced than sculpture, than structural architecture. That's what it will be with the arches of the Eads Bridge now emphasized. Public realm paths. We're going to put many more paths into the arch grounds, so again you can get around and feel comfortable going to the reflecting ponds. Big to me are what's labeled there as the east slopes. Right now the only way to the river, and this is key for people who love the Mississippi River, the only way to the river is the monumental staircase from the arch grounds to the river. They're beautiful, they are monumental, but when you're walking down them, you're going to watch your step, you're not going to look at the river. When you're walking up, you're going to watch your step, you're not going to look at the arch and the arch grounds. We're adding slopes, starting with 4 points at the top, 1 point each merging at the bottom, and major change to the experience of tying CityArchRiver. City of St. Louis owns the riverfront, the Port Authority owns the riverfront. They, together with Great Rivers Greenway, our wonderful parks and trails group, which is regionally taxed, Great Rivers Greenway will take over basically the operation of the riverfront with them, and the park, the experience, the public space experience will be one. It will be one. It won't be who owns the property. Visitors don't care. The riverfront is a big point. Right now, this riverfront suffers because of the flooding and the randomness, which keeps away any reliability of a visit, and certainly the commercial businesses can't touch it. They just can't invest or staff up for all the variety. This year, they would have a great year. I wish we were building this year, by the way. We'd have more construction space than we ever needed. Last year at this time, though, it would not have been as happy a coincidence because the water would have been up. By raising Leonore K. Sullivan Boulevard about 2.5 feet between Choteau and Biddle, that'll eliminate 60 to 70% of these occurrences and suddenly make it viable to really make it into a reliable spot to entertain. Right now, that's what it is also. It's a straight street which becomes kind of a drag strip with ballards and concrete blocks and stuff that will say, don't come up here, and if you do, watch your step, you're going to fall down. To a much more peaceful, relaxing, reflective atmosphere with and paving the street in a way that will allow bicycles and pedestrians free rein, and for the automobiles that will be left on there, it will be gradualized considerably with different paving and bowed out, so you won't look at a straightaway and say, I'm going from here to there. You're going to have to go around a little bit. Great landscape architects who I think they're going to have the next 50 years of America instead of the structural architects. They can make these experiences happen. Van Valkenburg's proven that at Brooklyn Bridge Garden in New York. He's proven it Princeton University's proven it in front of the White House. He can really change an experience just the way he bows it, paves it, trees it. You can see people coming down the slope on the upper right-hand side. That's the east slope now. Instead of coming down the steps, wheelchair, baby trail, baby stroller, you name it, come down. So I leave the design a minute just to try to get you a few clues. None of this is that relevant to you all, but key dates, you got to be patient with this. You got to have been at Broadway and all that for a long time to say, I'll be here a longer time. But Dirk Kempthorne came. He was then the Secretary of Interior. Best news we had, he had been the mayor of Boise, Idaho, and he realized, talking to Mayor Slay then, what cutting through the middle of a city does to a city. And you've got to get over that. He did promise a general management plan. Those sometimes take 7, 8, 9 years. He said it'll be done in 18 months. It was. Ken Salazar replaced him as Secretary of the Interior, came, saw this. He had been in Denver as Attorney General of Colorado during the time the Platte River was brought back, which has been extraordinary for Denver and proven a central core city which has rebounded faster than most because of the life experience you get on the river. He bought in right away, and he said, we'll get it done by October 28, 2015. Well, he didn't anticipate the national budget, but since he was spending our money, it was all right. So he said, we'd get it done by October 28, 2015, and we are. We formed a competition group which was inclusive. It's small, we could act, we could make things happen, but we had the Park Service, we had the Dean of Architecture, we had Lynn McClure, who's with the advocacy group, and most times sues the Park Service. Myself, Deborah Patterson, who's a wonderful St. Louis and president of the Monsanto Fund, Mayor Slay, and the Chancellor of SIUE, Von Vandegrift, who's been a great person here. We started with a competition site. We purposely said soft boundaries. I recommend that to all of you, because once you put a hard boundary, people feel, that's not my problem, that's not my opportunity, I'm out of here. We've made a change there. We've softened our boundaries further, and you'll see that green line going up to Biddle on the north and down to Choteau on the south. It's our partnership with Great Rivers Greenway, the Regional Trails and Greenways group, which says this river experience, don't get trapped in your own knitting. Don't stop it at Eads and don't stop it at Poplar. Flow people in, flow people out. These were our design goals. They serve as our constitution. We adopted them on day one. We never left them. I recommend that as a lesson. Don't leave your design goals, whatever they are. Get a good set, get it broadly. The Park Service bought into this. Everybody bought into this. Use it so when you can use it as reference on tough decisions you have to make in the future. The only change I'd make would be in paragraph 8 right now. Instead of mitigate the impact of transportation, I'd say maximize, because as it's turned out with the new Mississippi River Bridge and things we couldn't believe would happen, which are pluses, are happening. The disappointment is 5. We are embracing the Mississippi and the East Bank, but right now we're just hugging. We can't get to the altar. Post-2015, maybe with Mike Buellhorn and all, it will happen. We have a jury which was not just, you don't ask you to recommend any of these names, but it wasn't just the design people. It wasn't just people saying, now that's really beautiful. We had developers, people from St. Louis like Gerald Early, who's an expert on Miles Davis and baseball in the Mississippi River, Denny Galvin from the Park Service, people who would say, we need to have something real happen, not just dream up some grand design again. And it's all got to happen by October 28, 2015. So don't come in with a design that is even more beautiful, but cannot be accomplished until lives and being plus 21 years. This might have been the best thing. Our competition manager, Don Stastny, who'd done competitions for the Park Service, Flight 93, the Muroc Courthouse, State Department, he's done the London Embassy, the Beirut Embassy, the Beijing Embassy, the Berlin Embassy. He said, we form a technical advisory group as we go forward. We bring in all the, what we might call the points of veto. Everybody can say no and put them at the same table, and they keep coming. We're still meeting with them, so that we've got 100 points of veto turned into 100 points of light. And not a one of these people is giving up his or her fundamental mission, statutory, regulatory, political role and rule. Not a one of them is compromising on what's essential, but each one of them is looking across the table at each other and say, I get it, I get why you're doing that, so maybe I can do a little of this. Don't let them become silos. Make them come to the room. What we did at Bryan Cave fundamentally was we have some of the best chocolate chip cookies. And I say that semi-lightly, but that keeps a meeting going. And it kept people talking. The other key is, of course, to have the historic landmark people sit next to the Commissioner of the Disabled. They don't get along at all, even though they're both carrying great flags. But it's serious. To get the disabled community involved and the historic landmark people involved, deal with that old courthouse. How do we get people to the second floor? What are we going to do? You can imagine the screams coming from each side. But they all came, and Don Stastny, our competition manager, in the very first meeting say, just give me your 3 largest concerns about this project. And each one of them and they briefed the design teams. And when the design teams were designing, they came in May and were allowed to present their preliminary designs to this technical advisory group. And went around the table and we give them red light, green light, yellow light. And then they came back in June with their designs. Red light, green light, yellow light. What are you really doing? This just ain't going to fly. And everybody was down on the river, needless to say. They were going to do really wonderful things on the river, forgetting that the river has a lot of feet between it, whenever it's making up its mind where it's going, and things like that. And as a consequence, we ended up with 5 hugely valuable, vibrant designs, but none of them were red lighted by the Corps or the Coast Guard or the Harbor Master or the NPS, MoDOT, IDOT, you name it. I really recommend getting anybody who can stop you into the room on day 1 and keeping them there, be it chocolate chip cookies or whatever. Quality of life, unfortunately, we've got too many. If we've got a problem right now, it's our messages, which we can't get into one. Being able to use that marvelous space for education, the civic impacts, and so much of our identity is wrapped up in that, if, as, and when the Cardinals get back to the World Series, not as likely this year as last. If and likely the Rams ever get to Monday Night Football, which is really a distant dream, I'm afraid. But whatever, the whole recognition of this community throughout the world is based so much on that, and it is what centered us. We have a highly fragmented community. We, like so many cities that you all live in, the highways took over bringing people together and whatever, but this is at least is our symbol. The aesthetic Severo Saarinen should never be denied. The social, there's nothing like a park. A park doesn't care how rich you are, how poor you are, how diverse you are, what you're speaking or anything else. Everybody can enjoy them, especially if there's some water running in St. Louis in the summer. And it's an extraordinarily powerful experience. Environmental, right now, though, again, this was built in the 60s, so everything was plentiful. Resources were plentiful. So city water goes into those reflecting ponds. So the fertilizer on that grass to keep it up, needless to say, that's why the algae's prospering in the reflecting ponds, which therefore don't reflect anything. On and on and on. And the economic impacts are incredible. If we can keep the visitors to the Arch who are coming today from out of town, 4 out of 5 of the visitors are from out of town. St. Louis claims no ownership except for the pictures. 4 out of 5 of the visitors. If we can keep them a half day longer, it's the equivalent, and this is powerful currency in St. Louis, of more than the economic impact of a Cardinal baseball season. It's the equivalent of almost 5 NCAA Final Fours each year, every year, going on. Just keep them a half day longer. And that's because you've got a park and a river and a piece of sculpture that you're truly celebrating and making interesting. What you're all probably saying about this time is, how did St. Louis ever get this far if they're so dumb not to have done this before? But that's another question. They think I'm a good guy because I'm doing it. So we started as a fundraiser and a design competition runner. We're now going to move ourselves into a conservancy. And this is, again, I recommend, as you're doing anything on the rivers, show that you're not just there for the opening and the ribbon cutting. Show you're there long term to police it, to have a conscience to it, to support it, to whatever, whenever the government fails or whoever fails, somebody's got to be there as a backstop to catch them, say, hey, you enough deferred maintenance, enough this and that, and by the way, we'll contribute along the way. So from being a fundraiser and a design competition, we're now deeply involved in the construction, the operation, the whole community engagement, wayfinding and parking, extremely important. I wish Jeff would have left because I was going to give my commercial. I'll give it to Otis. visitor experience is what all is. We could have the best arch and the best park in the world, and if people can't find out how to get there or where to park when they get there and feel comfortable about that, you've already lost 75% of your vote. We've got to do that downtown wide, and we've got to do it before we get to 1028. And we've also got all these other places where we touch things. The old cathedral now has a $14 million campaign going on to refresh it and fix it up. On north of Eads Bridge, Lumiere, Four Seasons, Laclede's Landing, the diverse businesses up there finally saying, hey, we're a district ourselves, why don't we take advantage of this? Others are jumping in and saying, we're connected to all this, and it's rolling out and rolling out, so we keep on hopefully helping them. There's some advantages. Metro, Bi-State, the Metrolink sponsored a parking study to prove up we could take down that old parking garage, and in fact how we should run parking in downtown St. Louis for it to make sense to the resident, to the visitor, to the commuter, whoever. Tiger Grant, we had a $20 million Tiger Grant, which a few years ago would have been called chump change, but it was pretty darn big in December 2011, a verification, and we put up a $10 million private match out of CityArchRiver Foundation as part of the inducement. But it showed that MoDOT, the NPS, all the people listed at the bottom could get together and make the pitch. The river landing is north of Eads Bridge, and those people, CityArchRiver contributed, Otis St. Louis Development Corporation contributed, Great Rivers Greenway contributed to bring all the private people together, and this was public at its best. We didn't let any private money in. We didn't want them in because we didn't want them to open it, but each of us as a philanthropic or public agency said, we'll sponsor a guy named Ken Greenberg from Toronto who's done waterfronts around the world. He gets it, he understands the opportunity to really put all the pieces together for us, and we're working through that. Great Rivers Greenway itself, being the parks and greenway and trails and greenway, has gotten its vision for the riverfront into this, and that on the lower right is the Archdiocese's symbol of redoing the old cathedral. So these things have all kind of burgeoned out of the enthusiasm. Go to our website and eat dinner. I'm sorry to go on too long, but I get enthusiastic. Ah, shoot. That takes all the fun out of it. Sure. Actually, we're doing very well. On the highway and road side, $26 million from MoDOT, $20 million from the federal government, $10 million from our foundation, $500,000 from the city. That's, mayors will appreciate those relativities. That gets the park over the highway and all the work at Eads Bridge and south to done and takes care of all of that work. The national, and then Great Rivers Greenway through its own taxing power and through some Sarbanes grants and some earmarks it received is now got almost $20 million for the riverfront work, with another 12 or 15 to go, but we can raise that. The biggest unpaid for elements then left are, number one, all the trails, the sidewalks, the bridges, the types of things that aren't too exciting to private philanthropy and they think the public realm should take care of. And when you make all of this happen, there's almost $110 million of that type of improvement running throughout. And that, we have a sales tax proposal which we hope will go on the ballot in April of 2013. It would be a 3/16 cent sales tax being submitted to the voters of the city of St. Louis County, and St. Charles County. We've got good favorable polling throughout because A, they believe in the arch, B, they believe in the credibility and the delivery so far of Great Rivers Greenway and what they've contributed. With that tax in hand, 30% of it will be devoted to the arch, 70% to Great Rivers Greenway, well, actually 30% to the arch, 30% to Great Rivers Greenway, 30% to the cities and to the city of St. Louis and the 2 counties, and the balance to municipalities within St. Charles County and St. Louis County. We like to get a lot of people in on the vote. Money for everybody. But it's important money because this will be very big for St. Louis County and St. Charles County and St. Louis City in maintaining their parks generally. So it's basically a park ballot. $11 million a year or so would be available for the arch. The rest of it would go back into regular parks and trails. We'll bond that out for the access and the sidewalks. That will leave about $200 million that we are raising privately for the museum and things that the public sector is not interested in, and the private sector says we expect we will pay for those things. And we're doing very well on that fundraising. So we're well over, well, we're well into $100 million, and it's going very well. There's a lot of enthusiasm. It's not the best time to ask for money from anybody, but I think people get it. We've got these humongous assets, the river, the arch, and they just need to be connected and invigorated. The secret sauce of it all is having an arch. You can get one. You know.